Rail gauges, narrower than the 1,435 mm standard gauge, have been and are in use in India. Second, the channel tries to build up a monopoly argument that the British chose broad gauge to preempt a possible purchase of rolling stock by Indian railway companies from countries other than Great Britain. This argument lacks any merit, because India was under British rule, and in 1853, and when the first trains ran in India, Britain did not even remotely consider the possibility that in less than 100 years, they would be overthrown. Moreover, Britain herself had railways, built to standard gauge, and had a thriving railway industry. It would have made more market sense to build standard gauge railway in India. Yet, the British chose broad gauge, because the limitations of standard gauge were becoming apparent, particularly the narrower loading gauge that it offered. It must be remembered, the primary reason the British chose to build railways in India was to carry freight from the hinterlands to the ports on the coast. A broad gauge railway offered a better option. Third, the channel laments that broad gauge in India was a mistake, because standard gauge is better suited for high-speed travel. This again is rubbish. A wider gauge could offer greater stability at high speeds, and therefore, a broad gauge railway would be equal or better suited for high-speed railways than standard gauge. Indeed, Russia has a high-speed railway built on the broader 15 to 0 mm gauge. The question arises why India's first high-speed train is on standard gauge. I have answered this question in this video, but to put briefly, the reasons are commercial and not engineering. Rolling stock companies would have to redesign the high-speed bogies for the 1676 mm Indian gauge. It makes better economics to simply sell the existing standard gauge rolling stock off the shelf to India, rather than to design a new 1676 mm high-speed bogie. From 1955 to 2000, the Indian Railways used passenger rail cars designed with a Swiss car and elevator manufacturing company of Switzerland. While state-of-the-art in the 1950s displayed and design cars manufactured at ICF, Chennai had limitations in terms of speed potential, heavy corrosion, poor riding comfort, and bearing of parts in the undercarriage. To overcome these limitations, in 1995, Indian Railways entered into a supply and technology transfer agreement with Alstom LSB of Germany to initially supply 24 rail cars consisting of 19 air conditioning chair cars, 2 AC executive chair cars, and 3 generator also brake ones. Over the years, several variants of the LSB cars have been introduced by the railcourts factories of the Indian Railways. These range from the AC First Class AC 2-tier sleeper, AC 3-tier sleeper to the second-class sleeper cars. Special variants like higher capacity double-decker cars have also been introduced. The flagship among all these would undoubtedly be the semi-high-speed Train 18 variants. The Fiat Sig bogies of the LHB cars were designed for a speed of 160 km per hour. Newer designs of the Fiat bogies fitted to Tekis rakes and the Train 18 are, as the track conditions permit, capable of a top speed of up to 200 km per hour. The LSB cars were commissioned by the Indian Railways in the year 2001. Compared to ICF, LHB cars are superior in passenger comfort, safety, speed, corrosion, maintenance and aesthetics. And unlike the ICF cars, LHB cars are anti-telescopic, which means they do not get turned over or flip in the case of a collision or derailment. This greatly improves passenger safety. LHB cars are approximately 2 meters longer than ICF coaches. This translates into 2 additional rows of chairs in chair cars, or 1 additional bay in sleeper coaches. The weight of LHB cars is less than an ICF coach. An LSB coach can accommodate 72 passengers as compared to 64 in conventional ICF, 3-tier coach, thus giving a better pay-to-tear ratio. However, unlike the ICF cars, LSB cars do not have capacity for self-generation of electricity for hotel power. The Fiat bogie does not allow space for alternators and other self-generating equipment. LSB rakes therefore are provided with diesel-powered generator cars called end-on generator car. A typical 24-car rake would need to have 2 EOG cars, one at each end. The EOG cars on an average consumed 3,000 liters of diesel and made 100 decibels of noise. These polluting cars that occupied important fare-paying passenger space are being gradually replaced by the head-on generation technique, where hotel power is provided by the locomotive under the new HOG system. Instead of the 2 EOG cars, there will be one standby silent generator car for use in emergencies. In place of the other car, there will be an LS, LRD or LHB second luggage guard and Divyang compartment. The LS, LRD car will provide space for luggage guard room and additional passengers. Currently, with EOG the cost of hotel power is over 36 rupees per unit, and with HCG, it will be available at rupees 6 per unit. In the aftermath of the 19th of March 21 Indore Partner Express accident, the Indian Railways has decided to phase out ICF cars. Manufacture of ICF cars was stopped in 2018. All rail coach factories, under the Indian Railways, will now only manufacture the LHB cars time between Pune and Nashik from the present 8 hours to less than 2 hours. Operational incompatibilities due to multiple gauges had prompted the Indian Railways to aggressively implement Project Uni Gauge and make broad gauge the standard in the country. However, stubborn coaxing, but rolling stock companies and other vested interests, saw metro rail companies adapting the standard gauge. Indeed, the Mumbai-Ahmedabad high-speed railway, which was originally planned as broad gauge, is now being built to standard gauge on persuasion of rolling stock companies. I hope better sense prevails and the Pune-Nasik line will remain on broad gauge. The line will have a design top speed of 250 km per hour, and trains are expected to run at 160 to 180 km per hour on the line. The rolling stock is planned to consist of 6 rigs. Each 6-car rig will make 48 trips in a day and transport 450 passengers. Train 18 in its basic configuration has 4 cars, and it can be suitably modified to comprise of 6 cars. But with internal bickering having almost derailed the Train 18 project, it is possible or likely that foreign vendors may be approached to supply the rigs. The project has a planned completion date in 2024. Oh well and good, but you might be wondering if one gauge is better than the others. As a general rule of thumb, narrow gauge tends to be cheaper to build, since it uses fewer raw materials. It is also more useful for following hill contours, more appropriate for going around sharp corners, and is better for light railway. But this comes at a trade-off. Trains usually need to run slower on narrow gauge, and the narrower cars can carry fewer materials per train. Broader gauges, on the other hand, can carry relatively more materials per car and at higher speeds up to a point, but these wider gauges are much more expensive to build. To this end, choosing a gauge involves the weighing up of the pros and cons for a particular environment and budget. To conclude, we can sum up the reasons why different train gauges exist around the world. 1. The original gauge chosen was often a matter of chance or circumstance. 2. Once a gauge was in widespread use in a particular country, There was often no economic benefit to converting to a new gauge. 3. Narrower gauges were often chosen because of geography. 4. Wider gauges work better on flat ground and where a large amount of materials and/or people need to be moved by train. These information were compiled from several videos, compiled and put together, related to train gauges, relative to speed, stability with historical, related facts with absolutely practical logic, all as much pertinent to the for and against arguments heard lately with regards to the K-Rail, Silverline hurry to plunder by the CPM, LDF of Kerala. As someone who has actual rode on the Japanese Shinkansen bullet trains traveling upwards of 400 kilometers long distance and also once rode the Shanghai maglev that operates from Shanghai to the Pudong airport occasionally approaching 500 kilometers per hour, but for a rather short but fast, expensive ride. I do take some real factual interest in these things. Hope it helps you start learning and start thinking, learning and demanding some real answers. You have some real greedy, desperate, corrupt, ignorant CPM, LDF government MLA and politicians at all levels. We have been entertained by their half-assed, shooting themselves in their own foot mentality. They should and can start explaining, if they will. Thongya Vasam cannot be accepted. The people have to tell them so. We know they usually are not logical and are just brute force, arrogant, fact-avoiding, Thongya Vasam people. Too bad that's whom you elected and got fooled by some cheap kits and gimmicks. But this time we have a lot more folks against them, for all kinds of reasons, logical, political, and personal property-related reasons. We want to stay in the order of logical and then use the logical politicians and everyone else to sensibly stop them from plundering the nation, state and the next generation. For that we all need to learn or update some factual, verified information so as to be knowledgeable on all related matters and up to date and relevant. I have started following these stuff as it has gained steam on the K-Rail, Silverline project and all objections. I can for sure say from all observations that the CPM, LDF seems to be in extreme hurry so as to pocket some money, before their time runs out. Most of them have not much of any clue, that is complete with facts. Corruption and plunder is their only motive and that's all the reason why they are in such a hurry. We, from Kadapra, Kumbar Nad we have seen firsthand in real terms how rotten this CPM, LDF government and its arrogance has been. The previous one led by UDF, was no better. We have seen how money by a willful polluter out to hoodwink us all on the illegal bitumen plant. Our MLA Veena onwards is not trustworthy, does not give a damn illogical and cunning. Every level of the establishment, from Panchayat to the district medical officer to the collector was proven inefficient and perhaps just as corrupt. The top set the behavior of all else in governance. So before they can even do anything major, they have to be seen efficient, effective and truthful. We need our government to be factful and truthful first. And so, we ought to know how to deal with them. Because we can't trust a corrupt government to do anything right. Nothing they do or say are reliable or trustworthy. Past is of course, prologue.